All right, folks, welcome to module 6. We have completed good 5 modules, correct? So there is good amount of progress which we have done. Last 2 modules left. Let me remind you, this has 13% weightage, and this is very specific to how you audit applications. I repeat, how you audit applications. So let's quickly spend some time. Of course, there are a lot of things which is going to be repetitive, the controls, preventive, detective, all those things. So I'm going to skip them. I'm not going to spend too much time. But let's quickly sail through this particular chapter. So what is the importance of controls? We all have understood that controls are vital checkpoints. They avoid frauds, they avoid misstatements, they avoid errors, embezzlements, and it gives an assurance to the stakeholder that, hey, you know what, everything is okay. It's not so bad. Things are fine, and compliance with law and regulation is also taken care. So that's the entire purpose of control. To quickly define a control, we spoke about controls in chapter 3, where we spoke about governance. Controls are nothing but those which reasonably ensure or reasonably give an assurance that uh, there are issues are identified, prevented, detected, corrected, and the risk of misstatement is minimized. Okay, so those things which ensure that, it could be policies, it could be procedures, it could be practices, it could be organization structure, all of them fall within the meaning of control. So how so typically the types of internal control, I think this is a repetitive image which you have been noticing: preventive, detective, corrective. These are the broad categories, and each of these categories have interrelationship: preventive, detective, and corrective, the flow in which they go. And we also spoke about this implementation of internal controls: admin, technical, physical. And we spoke about this particular chart, so I'm not spending too much time, because all these things are omnipresent, or across these chapters you will find the presence of this. And remember, one more exam tip is that whatever happens or wherever you are reading, preparing, etc., please keep in mind that it may have a bearing or implication with respect to preventive, detective, corrective. So those are questions which will always be asked. And we also looked into internal controls consist of IT general controls, IT system-based controls, general controls and IT controls. General controls are something which is nowhere involvement of technology, purely manual or very limited. Incidentally, some technology is involved. It could be anything relating to your business process. But when the focus over here, my dear friends, is on the IT and IS controls. When we look into IT and IS controls, you have the application control, IT general control. Application control is what we are going to spend some time in this chapter. General control we have already covered, so I'm not touching upon. To give you a quick recap, general controls are those controls which are pervasive in nature. It is not application specific, it's spread throughout the organization. And at the same time, it is like an entry level controls. So if those controls itself failed, the question of application controls really doesn't matter. Example could be login, access, network, hardware, operating system. All of those can come under your IT general controls. Now, what is a business model? This is important. Business model and controls have a very good relationship. Each business model will have some sort of a basic control structures built into it. And depending upon the business application software which is used, the controls will change. And SAP may have a different controls. Oracle may have a different controls. A QuickBooks or a Zoho Books may have different set of controls. So the way in which they are implemented and executed is what is critical. Now, a business application, you can talk about a point of sale device. In a point of sale device, what happens? The way it operates is different. What's a point of sale? That's swiping. You swipe the card, you do a data entry, you enter what are the card details, etc. Maybe recording attendance. Attendance software may work a little different, biometric, etc. All those things. Then you have a wage payment related calculation. What happens in the case of a wage payment? The focus is on how you're calculating the wages, the basic wage, arrears, all of this. Then you have automated e-payment system. When you have these automated e-payment system, we are referring to those payments which are, it happens on a repeated manner, it happens on a regular basis, and more importantly, real-time settlement may happen. Correct. So application may incorporate these key business processes, and the goal and structure to help the entity achieve this is what is covered in business application. Now, how do I decide which application has to be followed? That's the most important thing. And to decide that, there are a few key parameters. What is that? The goal is the first step. What is my business goal? The moment you determine what your business goal is, then you go to the nature of business, whether it's geographically spread just in one location, The timing of operations, e-commerce 24/7. They may work even on holidays. Really doesn't matter. But there are some other business which works only on a specific timeline. Correct? And you may have businesses which are having so unique models, especially this shared offices. Okay. What these shared offices did was, if you are taking a shared office on rent between Monday to Thursday, they have a different pricing. If you're taking between Friday to Sunday, they have a different pricing. Why? Because Friday to Sunday nobody takes, because it's on weekend and other things. So if anybody hires between Friday to Thursday, from Friday to Sunday, they are given a very very discounted price. But the real question is, who wants to come and use it? You can decide. Maybe you may have meetings, discussions, forums, whatever. Next, what is the volume of transactions? When you use the word volume of transactions, what am I looking at? What is the extent? Am I going to have 2, 5, 10, 20, 100, 500,000? What is my law asking me to do? Correct, regulatory requirements. So all of these becomes key parameters for me to decide if these application. Next, a few examples. You can talk about accounting application, Tally, Zoho Books, QuickBooks, banking applications such as your your Finacle, FlexCube, the popular ones. You have few things like banks, BNCS, software, a few things which are used by smaller level banks. Then you have your ERP application. It could be SAP, it could be Oracle, NetSuite, Microsoft Dynamics, a bunch of those things. Then you have your payroll application, which is a cloud-based in-house Saral TDS, Saral payroll. Then you have what is that? Greater payroll, Zoho payroll. A lot of interesting apps which are there like this. Quickly moving further, what are the other business applications? You may have office management software. For example, tracking task. Who's doing what, when, why? Compliance applications, GST softwares, TDS compliance, income tax compliance, ROC compliance, CRM softwares, keeping a track of your customers. Many of the CAs do not have that. That's a nice software which you can go ahead and try, where you can have a list of your customers, you have their contact database, when did you last speak to them, some sort of a conversational information, etc. Then you have the management support software. A management support software is something which helps the management in taking decisions, maybe a reporting, a BI tool, etc. Then, of course, you have what is called as your other business applications, logistics management. What is logistics? Transportation, e-commerce, legal matter software, which is something to do with your disputes, issues, etc., which can come up, case law registry, and industry specification. For example, computer-assisted audit, computer-aided designing, CAD. Correct. So those are certain things specific to each of them. So this is a broad landscape of your business application. So I'm skipping the questions because it is already there. And quickly move on to how do you audit and review applications. Okay, and the reason why you are noticing me doing this particular chapter a little at faster paces, not that it's coming towards the end, it is because many of the fundamental concepts what we studied in the first few chapters are repeated over here. Okay, so we look into audit and review of these applications. How do we focus on the controls and testing? Whenever you focus on controls and testing, before that, one very important thing you need to understand in this particular section is the hierarchy in which these applications or these systems are. The hierarchy in which these applications work is, first and foremost, you have the business model, and then you have the application. So business model is the first most, and then you have your application. That is something which you have to be very critical, and you need to be careful when you are actually sharing this. Let me just give me a minute. I'll just show you how that is. Not sure if it is here. Yeah. So first and foremost is business model. Then comes your business controls, and then comes your business application. Okay, sorry, business application and then business controls. So that's basically the structuring how it is. Okay, let's quickly move on to the next section, which is audit and review of applications as I started. Now, what are these application controls? These application controls represent an interface between the user and the business function. I repeat, between the user and the business function. So what are a few components? You have boundary control, input control, processing control, output control, database related control. So a bunch of these things come under these application controls. So first is your boundary control. What is the meaning of boundary? Something which logically is separating two things. For example, I and the computer are separated. We both are two different persons. If we have to interact with each other, the computer first has to authenticate me. So user ID and password is a boundary control. Example 2. From one environment, you are accessing another environment. Say, for example, you did a shopping in Amazon or Flipkart or SnapClose or whatever, ShopClose or whatever. And from there, you are moving to the next website, which is a payment gateway. Now, this is a boundary. Why? Because ShopClose or Amazon or Flipkart is restricted only to this. Beyond that, the payment gateway comes into picture. So how the transition between A to B takes place, that is another example of an application or boundary control. Correct? So that is called as a cryptographic control. Why? Because when it moves from one location to another location, one website to another website, the data has to be encrypted. Otherwise, it becomes a challenge. So data may be in any stage, input, processing, transit. Control should restrict the user access accordingly, according to the business policy and organization structure. And then you have your application boundary controls, which is your logical security, login ID passwords, accessing the application only from specified terminals. Example is bank. You can access only from specified terminal. You take your computer and connect it, it will not work. Why? They have enabled only for that particular PC. Cryptographic control, encryption, correct? Using of audit trail. So all of these will ensure that the boundary has been clearly demarcated and identified. Now, as an auditor, what will you review? How is the exchange of information within the organization? One department to another department, how does it go? From the front end to the back end, how does it go? Between multiple databases, how does it actually interact? There's a software which is used for A purpose, software used for B purpose. In the back end, are these both integrated? For example, payroll software is independent, accounting software is independent. They may be integrated in the back end. Correct? Your point of sale software and your ERP may be integrated in the backend. So all of this is the exchange of information. This is where you focus when you're trying to look into it. Second, exchange of information outside the organization. Now, for example, you are uploading some software or some information from your company to an external resource. It could be your ERP is having access to a vendor. Why? He wants to see only the inventory and that too only of his raw material or his product, so that he can automatically ship it. He need not worry. How is the exchange of information taking place? Is it secured? Am I using an SSL encryption? Am I using a virtual private network? Correct? So all of those. The third, how is a third party resources accessed by the organization? I am within the office. How am I accessing the internet? How am I able to reach out to them? And is that and my system interconnected? Those are the things which you have to look into it. If you visit a bank, none of the systems you can use the internet connection. In the branch manager's computer, there'll be a one system where you can use it. And the control in the case of a bank is wherever internet is there, it will not have the core banking access. Simple rule. Why? Exposure and risk is high. They're logically separated. That's all. Correct? Then third party having access to our organization resource. I think I already gave an example of that vendor and other things. So these are four things as an auditor when at a boundary you will actually look into it. Next comes your input controls. Now these are controls which are responsible for accuracy and completeness of data. If you remember one Google form, all your input controls are taken care of. One Google form, all input controls are taken care of. I'll show that probably as a small demo. Why? Let me tell you, inputs ensure that the quality of whatever you're processing is right or wrong. Garbage in, garbage out. So if the data, whatever you're entered is invalid or fake or is fictitious or incorrect, entire cycle goes for a toss. Therefore, input controls are designed. And remember, most of the cases, not all cases, most of the cases, input controls are preventive controls. Why? Because they prevent the input from being incorrect. Example, simple example. Number field, only mobile number field, mobile number, only number you can enter, no alphabet. Simple examples. Correct. So maybe let me try to show you something live so that you get a better idea. It is easier for you to remember it. Correct. So I'm just sharing my screen. Just give me a minute. So let me go to create a Google form. You will be in a better position to understand. Google Forms. Yes, here it is. A blank form. Okay, this is a simple blank form. Here itself, you can implement all these controls. Let's take an example. You're just doing your income tax checklist for your client. Now, obviously, you want to enter the name of the person, correct? So if you notice here, it gives you what is called as a short answer. You have various options. The name of the person is obviously going to be short. You can write what is it that you want to fill in. Okay, so you can write here, or you can just add a field. You know, this is mandatory. So unless he fills up this form, it will not go to the next phase. Now you can also create one field saying show a description. Please enter your name as per PAN. Correct? So the client enters this information. You are done with this. Next. Now comes date of birth. The moment you click date of birth, look at this, automatically it is chosen date because there's the intelligence which Google has built in. Now, not every software may have that. Now look at this beauty. You can choose a date and it will give you a date option field here. Are you able to notice this? Now, these are all classical examples of how a typical Google form can be, input controls can be designed. Now here comes month, day, year. And the beauty is if I choose click over here and I, let's say, of course, you cannot enter anything here because this is the data questionnaire. Okay, so the moment I mention date of birth, okay, so it comes at date here. Now, this is mandatory. Now you want to enter mobile number. Now, the moment you choose mobile number, it says short answer. Now you can make a validation also, response validation. What is the response validation? The number should be greater than, let us say, uh, um, maybe you can just mention whatever, some 4 9s. Okay, enter valid number. So the moment I go click on preview, this is how it looks like. Okay, name. If I don't choose the name and I try to click submit, it will say that, see, this is a required question. And if I choose the date of birth, can you see here? Assuming I just choose here, here I'm able to see it. Now I choose mobile number as 11 and I just say submit. Look at this, enter a valid number. Let's say if I choose 11111 and if I click submit, it is accepting because the validation is limited. Now I can write a rule of validation that it should be only for 9 digits, 10 digits, etc. Now if I just write ASDF and submit it, it'll actually consider this. Correct? Now it is being recorded. Now, if you notice over here, this is the so-called backend where you can see how the results are recorded. Now this is a simple example how you can do it. Now you can have multiple things. You can create options, multiple choice, linear scale, multiple. So drop down. So this just to give you a gist on how inputs can be designed. So this is called as a source document design. What I just showed you was a source document design. So source document design, my dear friends, is all to do with how you're designing the source document such that limited errors or no errors are actually taken care of. Data entry, screen design, how you design the screen, data coding, batch controls, input validation, instruction input. So all of these are a few types of controls. We'll spend time in each of them. Next, edit controls, input control types, edit, prevent input from being entered that may cause an integrity problem. An example could be trying to avoid alphanumeric restrictions. A classical example, alphanumeric confusion, when we are always students, okay? We had this SRO or NRO or WRO numbers. And after the WRO or SRO, there was a zero. Even first time when we read it, we did not know what was zero and what was O. It takes some time. Now we all know it's SRO followed by zero. But if you're a first time user, you don't get to know. Sometimes you see some number plates, BOSS is written. That is nothing but 8055, fancy font. So a lot of these things are the alphanumeric restrictions. Next, date and hour fields, correct format. Now in India, date is DD, MM, YY. Abroad, MM, DD, YY. To avoid this, what they do is they say DD, triple M, WY. When I use the word triple one, that means triple M, that means the description of the month has to be there. So this will take care to some extent. For example, reasonableness check. Now somebody was entering the time at which something happened. 9:95 a.m. It's actually 9:59 a.m. While entering it so fast, they interchanged it. Correct? So these are all validations which you build in. Next, limiting the input fields to avoid invalid entries. Classical example drop down. What type of an assessee are you? Male, female, transgender. That's all. Or what is your category? Normal SSC, resident, non-resident. You can make it a very simple thing. Next, duplicate entries are not allowed. You have entered something there, it says you have already entered, do not submit. Or you have posted something in Facebook, once again you're trying to post the same thing, it says duplicate post. Logic, parts not greater than the sum. Example, let's say your what is that thing called, ROC form. You have total debtors, Sunday debtors, then you also have the breakup of Sunday debtors. More than 6 months, less than 6 months. More than 6 months, less than 6 months, if you combine, it should not be exceeding that. So those are the logic checks which we'll have in place. Then programmed cutoff dates. What is programmed cutoff dates? They are basically kept in such a way to ensure wrong data doesn't go. For a classical example, in Tally, let's say you're uploading some files from the bank statement. Some of these banks, they have these two dates, value date, effective date. Effective date can be maybe one day, value date can be the next month date also, but still the posting has to happen on the previous month. So when you're pushing the data through an automatic upload, etc., it may give an error. Effective date is next date or something. So cutoff dates have to be clearly defined. Next, execution of transaction not allowed until all data valid is submitted. In my Google form which I showed you, the form was not submitted until all the data was valid. Next, database operative. You cannot use star, you cannot use is equal to in some places. Why? These are considered as database operators. When you enter star or is equal to, you can sort of change the logic where without even entering the username and password, you can actually create some confusion. And the database generally tends to have a problem when you record star and is equal to fields. And that's why in some of these fields, when you, even though you record in your file name, it will say unable to consider or not permitted, slash, backslash, etc. So there are some logics which have been followed. Next, source document design. How the document is designed ensures the errors are minimal. It should increase the speed of entry because we keep on doing the tab. Ensures better control at the same time, assist in subsequent sort of a reference. The way in which your data entry field is designed, they should be either right below the caption, how you're entering, or there should be some sort of a logical relationship. And there should be a check button which should be used when the user has to choose from a small list of options. There will be a sort of a check button. Next, tabbing and skipping. When you use the word tabbing and skipping, here the focus is on, if I click on tab, generally it keeps on going to the next. Now what happens if I keep tab multiple times and I ignore that particular data entry? Then what happens? That doesn't get submitted. So there should be some sort of a validation which says, if you have skipped that, it should give a highlight. Correct? So the display rate, all of those come over. Next, data coding errors, MCQ question. Addition. Sometimes what happens? Extra character gets added. Truncation. One number gets removed. 783. I enter only 738. I pressed it, but I didn't press it so hard. Addition. 78 I pressed. When I'm entering 8 and 9, I pressed off. One more number. Transcription. Reverse recording wrong characters. Instead of A, you enter B. Okay, like 533, you enter 534. Some other number. Transposition, interchanging adjacent characters. 143, 1 and 4 you interchange. 413. Double transposition. 1412. Two numbers. 4121 you make it. So that will be 2 times. This could be an MCQ question. Next, factors affecting code of coding errors. Length of the code. Generally, longer the length of the code, obviously error prone. Example, bank account number. Whenever you're opening up, you're sharing your account number to somebody else, etc. This has to be very carefully decided or very carefully configured, because what happens, that is a manual entry which has to be done. So one number change is gone. An RBI rule is very clear. I will go based on account number, not by the name of the person. Okay. Next, alphanumeric mix. I think I spoke about some numbers, alphabets and numerics. When they get mixed, it will be a problem. Like BIO looks like 810, uppercase, lowercase, L and I. Correct. So those things are issue. Then sequence of characters. Example, ABC may interchangeably be ACV, things like that. Then you have what is called as a check digit. Now check digits, these are a good controls. Examination question. Which of the following are good controls to ensure data gets validated at the input stage itself? Check digit. Whenever you're entering only one text, just 5 alphabets, 6 things, etc., I use a check digit to validate or to ensure the previous information is not interchanged. I repeat, to ensure my previous information is not interchanged. When I say my previous information, let's say I'm talking about a string of text. 5 things are there. A classical example, let me not speculate, let me give a straight example. Bank account number or your PAN. PAN is a 10-digit alphanumerical number. The last digit of a PAN is a check digit, which ensures if any of the 9 digits which you have entered, if they are interchanged in one of the places, the last digit, whatever you enter, it'll immediately give you a error. So the last digit, my dear friends, is typically what is shown or what it reflects. Correct? So your last digit is typically how you get the error, or it gives you a validation. Just give me a minute. So when I use this last digit as a check digit, what happens? If any one of them is interchanged or in a altered, you will get to know the mistake. It will immediately say invalid number. So we'll look into examples. Hang on, I know you've fairly got the idea. We'll look into examples, you'll get an idea. The very next screen. Let's look at this check digit, how it was calculated. The input number is 4871. So what I do, I randomly assign some weightage. What is this weightage? 5327. I've assigned a random weightage. The moment I assign this particular weightage of 5327, then 1 multiply each number with the weightage. For example, 4 is multiplied with 5, 8 is multiplied with 3, 7 is multiplied with 2, and the 1 is multiplied with 7. You got this number called 65. Now I take that last digit called 5 and I ensure I keep it before transmission 4875. Now when I'm doing a data entry, instead of writing 4871, I wrote as 4781. That means I've done a transposition, correct? Or addition, multiple, whatever. That means when I run this rule again, which is this 5321 rule, whatever which I just spoke about, I just multiply. Do you think I'll get 65? The answer is no. I mean, you might still have an extreme case. It might be 55 and sort of work. But I devise an arithmetic algorithm to ensure that this last digit is something which I fixed. Okay, let us understand it better with an example of this book. In the book, you have that last digit, no? Even in your Disa book or whatever book you're looking, turn to the last page. When I say last page, literally last page, you will find this particular code. The last 2 digits are check digits. The last 2 digits are check digits. Now, what does the check digit ensure? It ensures that come what may, whatever is the scenario. I repeat, whatever is the scenario, that last 2 digits, if you interchange any one of these valuables, 3 1 2 3 4, I make it as 3 1 1 3 4, 3 2 1 3 4. Any combination I do, this check digit will not be true. How? It's based on some mathematical algorithm. It's called as Leuven's algorithm, not relevant in your syllabus, so don't worry. Now, what is the advantage? There's another classical example. You are entering your PAN details in the TDS repository. While filing TDS return, there is an option called validate PAN. Sometimes it will give an error. Why? The client would have interchanged one of these values. If you interchange any one of these values, my dear friends, this last digit will not be K. That's how the PAN card is formed. So what happens is, if you interchange any of these values and you enter last digit as K, it will say invalid PAN. So you'll be thinking, how is that possible? Then you go check. You'll realize the mistake. Correct? So this is a wonderful data entry control. Now this same can be extrapolated, and you also have what is called as a hash total. Now hash total works on the similar lines we discussed in, I think, chapter 4, I think, yesterday, where I made a mention of what is hash total. Okay, I'll come back to the difference between both of them. Just give me a 1 or 2 minutes, you'll get an understanding. Now, whenever you deal with an individual record, okay, such as this, a wonderful control is what is called as a check digit. When you're dealing with a series of records, that means there are multiple records. Now, how do you ensure the multiple records in my end is what is uploaded in your end? Simple method, what you do, I have my data file, 10,000 rupees is the total. You check in your system, 10,000 is the total. Matching, that is called financial total. Now there can be a situation only my total column is uploaded, individual line items is not uploaded. So what do you do? In mine, how many invoices are there? 10 invoices. There, how many invoices are? 10 invoices. Oh, 10 invoice, 10 invoice. Okay. This is called batch total, the total of that batch. But there is still a problem. What is the problem? Assuming this is GSTR1 details. Incorrectly for customer A or for your client A, you uploaded the invoice value B. Correct? Don't you think the client will be under trouble? He may not be able to take the input tax credit correctly. So in that case, what to do? That is where the beautiful concept called as hash total came into picture, where a non-numerical field, such as an invoice number, non-numerical is a non-amount field, such as your invoice number, such as your GST number. Those things are totaled or multiplied, etc. And when unique value is identified to ensure it is consistent. Let's see an example. I think we spoke about this example yesterday, okay, where you have worker ID, week number, hours worked, a product of or the sum total of the worker ID or sum total or the sum total of the product of the hours worked and the worker ID. All these things can become hash total. What is the difference between hash total and check digit? Check digit is applicable only for a single field, whereas hash total is applicable for the entire batch. So batch processing uses hash total, individual field uses check digit. Both of these are encapsulated in your TDS filing software. When you're entering PAN and when you right click and validate PAN, they use the logic of check digit. The same TDS software, when you're using it, you copy paste it, you run the entire file, you generate what is called form 27 capital A. Form 27A, right corner, bottom corner, left corner, somewhere you see, you'll find hash total. Okay, so these are all things which we already covered. Next, data input validation controls. Now, data input validation controls, you have what is called manual signatures on input. Simple example, every time you enter, ensure it is signed, the traditional method. Or you can ensure the input menu is available only for certain specified logins. That means only some people have entry access. Not everybody have entry access. A simple example, you can configure your tally in such a way that some person can only view reports, cannot do any data entry. Possible. Next, scanned input, OCR, barcode, MICR. So like this, you can add in lot of input authentication controls. Next, edit controls. Edit controls. Now, what are these edit controls? These are basically checks and balances. Now, this is to ensure that you have a track record. You have some sort of a control to ensure that whatever you're entering is moving in a logical manner. Example, sequence check. Question number 1, how many children do you have? Question number 2, are you married? The order 6 wrong, right? That is the sequence check. Next, range and limit check. You're filling up an insurance application form. Age, they ask. Let's say you enter 75 years, maybe for your parents or some grandparents, and it immediately says age should be within 0 to 65 years. Range and limit check. You define a range and limit. Missing data check. Simple. Any data missing, star field you mark it, immediately. Duplicate check. The same thing you're entering twice, it gives you an error. Programmed validity check. It is programmed to check the validity of the information. Say, for example, you are entering a credit card information, a credit card which is expired. Valid date check. Dependency match. On the lighter side, you are entering information in a matrimony website. Your profile is of a male. It is obviously meaning that you are searching for a female. I hope you're able to get it. Yeah. There may be difference of opinion and other things, but this is the general rule. Okay, I'm not going into that. So that's a dependency match. Based on one field, another field is depending. Example in an accounting, credits all are entered, debits are entered. There should be a match. Next, completeness check, whether everything is entered in the information. It is slightly related to that missing data check which you see on the screen. The completeness check and missing data. Next, reasonableness check. Dependents. You write 100 people. Then you must be wondering, what do you have such a big family? 100 people is okay. One fellow, when they asked about dependents, he wrote in income tax return, he wrote dependents. He said about six 2 crore people or 1.5 crore people. Then that fellow is like, how can you have dependence of 1.5 crore? He said, see, I'm a taxpayer. Based on my tax payment only, the entire India's this thing is dependent. So all of them are indirectly dependent on my inflow. So therefore, everybody is dependent. Jokes apart, but I hope you got the reasonableness. Then a stable lookup. The moment you enter your name or enter your user ID, it says welcome Mr. So and so, welcome Miss So and so. That's a table lookup. It is doing a lookup from one place and coming back to the other place. Correct? That's called as a table lookup. So table lookup is you enter something, it will go search from somewhere else and bring it and show it for you. Okay, so these are the edit controls. I gave you a gist here. Explanation, you can go and read through it. Next, how do you handle errors if it is there? Your errors can be handled in 4 methods. Reject only the transaction with error. That means everything else is accepted. Examination question, 4 options. Reject the whole batch of transaction. Nothing is accepted. Third, accept the batch but in suspense. That means you are accepting it, you are not posting it, it is still kept in a suspense. Last, accept the batch and mark it as an error. Okay, so it depends each of them. In the question you'll have to decide depending on what the expectation of the question is. So you'll have to decide which of the following is most user friendly. If you ask me, the first one. Reject only the transaction with error. But problem is you should know where the error is. What if from that line item every other line item has errors? In Tally, if you use an XML to import, if there's an error in the third line, after third line everything else will give an error. That's how Tally considers. That means what? It accepts only a part. It's not in one of these 4 options. It's something else unique. It's a combination of this. Accept the batch and mark the error transactions and keep it. So like that, you can decide and define how actually things operate. Processing controls. You have what is called run-to-run totals. Now, run-to-run totals are those which says if you have passing one additional entry, the impact of that additional entry is old entry plus this addition. It should not give a new value. Example, you have finalized the books of accounts. Now finally, when you're about to upload, you realize that you have not passed on very important entry, which is that audit fee entry. So you go now and pass the audit fee entry. When you pass the audit fee entry, obviously we pass the audit fee payable entry, debit expense, credit liability. So what should be the implication? When I increase my expense, profit comes down. When profit comes down, my reserves or capital, whatever is there, depending on the type of SSC, that will be reduced. Next, where there will be an increase, current liability will be an increase. That means, will my balance sheet total change? The answer is no, because there is a change between the categories of my balance sheet. But suddenly asset side is changing. That means something is wrong. Processing control. Next, reasonableness verification. You do some sort of a calculation, but you check whether it looks reasonably okay. Now you entered PF, you entered basic pay. But when you apply the ratio of PF divided by basic pay, it is coming 92% or 108%. Why? Because you added 1 plus 1 extra 0. So if basic was 15,000, you put PF as 18,000. You should have put 1800. So the system immediately crowns up and says, sir, this doesn't look logical. So even, of course, it will not, if it gives an immediate alert at the time of data entry, it's input control. When you're processing at the time it gives, it's a processing control. Next, exception reports. Now everything is passed, but these entries have some issue. So these are separately identified, exception. Correct? In Tally, if I go and see, there is something called as an exception report. In Tally Prime, they've made it even more evident. You can easily configure that. Output controls. Controls on how you get the data. For example, the moment you are filling up some form, what is that online? Now, whether that system will record and save all those things in your screen or not. Classical example, you went to a cyber cafe, you're entering this information, or you kept your mouse there. Immediately you type your number or something, one list of numbers are coming. Why? That Google Chrome is configured in such a way it can remember what you have entered. Correct? So you have to go and disable that. Correct? Storage of logging of sensitive forms. Logging of output program execution. Now, what is the output program? You have done some program. The moment the program is over, you should automatically log out. Otherwise, it's a trouble. Correct? Then comes your retention controls. Now, retention controls are those in terms of how long you intend to retain the data. What is the time period? Those come under your retention controls. Then control over control P. What is this? Who can have the access to printing? Can everybody in your organization print? Shouldn't it be restricted? Shouldn't it the display or print access should be regulated? So that is your control P. Then comes the report distribution. Who all can have access to the report? What can they do? What they cannot do? Correct? Report distribution. Then spool. Spool is a language normally used from a printer perspective, where all the instructions get accumulated together and then the print takes place. Okay. Sometimes I'm not sure how many of them have noticed. When you give a printout, 2-3 people give a printout at the same time, the printer gives a spool error. Why? See, when you give a printout and your friend gives a printout in the same printer, it will not print my one page, your one page, unless we have given it that way. It'll complete my instruction and then take his, or it'll complete his and then take mine. So all this is stored in the printer memory, which is the spool. Correct? So that's how the output control operates. Then you have a principle called non-repudiation. Now, non-repudiation is the assurance that someone cannot deny something. I repeat, non-repudiation is what? The assurance that someone cannot deny something. Now, something has happened. You cannot say that it did not happen. If you are a typical, contract law person, you would have read this word called as principle of estoppel. Correct? If a person says that he's a partner in a partnership firm, you are estopped from denying that fact publicly. The same concept is non-repudiation. Refers to the ability to ensure that a party to a contract cannot deny the authenticity of their signature or their transaction or what has happened. That's called as a non-repudiation. And this is possible through technology such as digital signature. So if a person has filed his income tax return using a digital signature, he cannot say that I have not filed it. He cannot, there's the principle of non-repudiation. It's an assurance that he cannot deny something. And then comes the next section. What are the techniques of review? How should an auditor review this? First, inquiry and confirmation. Inquiry, what? Investigation, get more information. Then confirm, speak with external people, confirm it. Then you have reperformance, redoing the everything again and again. Then you have recalculation. Now, what is recalculation? You're calculating something and checking it sometimes. Then you have computation. Computation is more to do with arithmetical process. Analytical procedures, ratio analysis, ratio of A versus B, B versus C. Inspection, you physically are present, inspect the premises and then come back. Observation, you observe what's going on, and other generally methods. In fact, these 8 points we also spoke in a system development life cycle, but the context was different. Okay, so I'm not covering the questions because it's already there in your material. The last part of it is how do I audit? Now, how do I audit this? Audit of application controls. We all know what is an IT audit. Examination of the controls within the IT environment. So you collect the evidence, gather the evidence, etc., etc. And then you focus on what are the key risks. Once you identify the key risk, you sort of need to assess those controls in order to reduce or mitigate these risks. So how do you perform an IS audit? Fundamental principle remains the same. Like a financial audit, the focus is more from a system controls. First, you define what is your audit objective, popularly called as audit mission, audit strategy, audit objective, audit goal. Now, what this does is it outlines the value addition that will be provided. Once this is done, now you go on to each of these steps. Step number 1, engagement planning. When I say engagement planning, again, you will notice a few of them repetition of your chapter number 2, because this is also audit, that is also audit. That is general audit, and here it is specific to application. Okay, determine the scope, timeline, deliverables. I told you scope is very, very important, determined by discussion, or also refer your audit chart. Then the timelines and deliverables. Then what is the compliance with the applicable laws and regulations? What are the professional standards? You may have to use SA 315, SA 330. You may use standard on internal audits. That's made mandatory by ICAI. You need to use a risk-based audit approach, documentation, reporting, all of those. Then comes your step 2. What is the risk assessment and planning? Risk assessment approach, risk assessment methodology, develop the overall IS audit plan. What are the effective allocation of IS audit resources? What are the tools? Do I have a risk control matrix? Do I have management discussion? All of these come under step 2. Then comes your step 3, performance and supervision. Conduct the work in accordance with the approved IS audit plan. How am I supposed to do it? Identify the risk within the agreed schedule. Maintain the progressive basis, on the resource count, how it works and things like that. Step 4, materiality. Consider the potential weakness. What happens if there are no controls? Check whether weakness of controls, absence of controls are there. Next, evaluate the evidence. Obtain sufficient and appropriate evidence to draw some sort of a reasonable conclusion. Give a sort of an IS audit and assurance professional. They evaluate the sufficiency of evidence obtained. And step number 6, using the work of an expert. Consider the use of work of experts. Assess and approve the adequacy of other expert professionals. For example, you may use the work of professionals such as vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, ethical hacker. You check what is the experience they are, whether they are, eligible to give that sort of an opinion and things like that. And of course, you use a lot of CAT tools, a computer-assisted audit technique, a tool which can help you to do things much more faster. A simple example: if you're doing a VLOOKUP, using a manual approach, this tool can do it much more faster. Or for that matter, you're doing some sort of a stratification, you're doing a Pareto, you're doing some sort of basic analysis. These tools can do much, much more faster. And they can do it so much faster that you will not realize the amount of time you're actually saving. Correct? So those are a few examples of these tools, typically what they can do. Correct? So let me see if I have a CAT tool which I can show you some sort of a simple demo to understand how these actually work so that you're able to practically relate a few things. Okay. It may take a few minutes, but I'll run the function so that the results will take a few minutes for it. A simple example, I have this date, invoice, name, sales. Now what I do is I ask this system, can you please give me some statistics about my data? I just want some column statistics. So it sort of takes a few seconds to run it. And let's see what it is able to give me. It gives me a small table like this. Let me share my screen. You can notice here. I just say, boss, give me all the statistics for all the numerical data. Just run it on all this information and give it to me. And I just say, okay, it'll take a few minutes. Let's see what it gives me. It's sort of running the result or loading. So if it takes, we'll see how the result comes so that you will be able to understand what is the real repercussion. Okay, and this is how the results look like. You notice this? Are you able to see this? It gives me a lot of interesting information. It says what is the average of positive records, what is the average of negative records, how many of them are having nil value, how many of them have positive value, what is the null value, correct? What is the distinct records, what is the maximum value and what is the minimum value. In fact, those which you can see colored over here, I just double click them and I'm able to get that value. For instance, I've just double clicked this and I am able to see this entire information. Do you notice this? Correct? But I don't want, I close this. I want which are those records with null value. Double click it, I get the answer. Now, which are those values where invoice number is also blank, sale is also blank? Look at this. So I get a lot of these interesting insights in a click of a button. Correct? This is a third-party tool called as eCAT, but nevertheless, the focus is to explain to you or bring to you that what is actually possible. Correct? Next, why do I require CAT? For evidence collection, analysis, and interpretation. Expect 1 or 2 questions on CAT. Generally, they ask you something on IDEA. I think IDEA was part of your syllabus during Disa. Otherwise, also just go through an IDEA software. What are the headers? Okay, I mean, just to understand which is the what is each function, or go through some critical functions in CAT tools, you will get an idea. Okay, analysis and interpretation. If e-evidence can be evaluated, And there's one very interesting guidance note on CAT tools. Go to our ICA website, you can download this. There they speak about a few functions. Go through those functions, because I've seen 2 to 3 exam questions comes on this. Sampling programs to extract data, testing of application controls, etc. Types of CAT: you can have a general audit software like IDEA, ACL. You can design and develop your own software. Some companies have done that. You can use an off-the-shelf sort of a system. Okay, ACL, IDEA are used. Your Excel itself is a wonderful tool. Okay, I'm not sure how many of them have used Excel. A simple stratification. I'm not sure how many of them do stratification in your audit. Now I just want to stratify this data. Okay, so all that I do is run a pivot, and I click on sales. Normally I mention my sales over here and user ID over here. Now look what I do. I don't mention user ID. I bring the sales itself here. Right click here, and I say group based on 10,000, and I say okay. Look at this. Or let me group it even more easier. Let me group it based on 25,000. Now this is called stratification. Now, what is stratification? I'm able to stratify the population into smaller intervals. Now I can take this further, right click this, look at this count. So I know majority of my sales are between this range. Next is this, next is this. Now I can also draw percentages and things like that. Right click this, show it as percentage. So I roughly get, what are the totals. Okay, sorry, I think I should have shown column total. But yes, it gives you all these options, correct? Let's quickly come back to what I was taking you through. This is a problem with Zoom whenever you're hope you're able to see my screen. Can you just send me a confirmation message? Sometimes with Zoom, this is a challenge. Fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So let me quickly go back to my screen. These are issues which occur. You may have the best of the technology, but still it will create some problem. Okay. Thank you. Okay, then is the concept of continuous auditing approach. Expect 1 or 2 questions from this compulsory. Okay, continuous audit. Auditing, where an auditor evaluates the system and generates the audit reports on a real-time basis. And continuous audit, what it does is, it eliminates the gap between the transaction which took place, I repeat, the transaction which took place, and the time taken to give the auditor's assurance. It happened today, I give an assurance within the next few days, it eliminates the gap. That's why banks go for a concurrent audit. Last month, as nearer as to. So as and when transaction happens, you keep on auditing it. This continuous auditing, there are multiple tools are used. The first tool is a snapshot. As the name suggests, snapshot is quite similar to that of a screenshot, but it is not exactly a screenshot. In screenshot, what you do, you capture a lot of information. You probably pick up some interesting insights, what happened, when it happened, and things like that. What happens in a snapshot is, it actually takes your digital picture, or it takes what is exactly the scene at the time when the entry was passed. What was the previous balance, what is the next balance, what is it before and after, things like that it captures. So instruction is executed in the memory. For example, in the ATM machine, what happened at this time? 3:30 a.m., 4:30 a.m. Somebody came, inserted something they did. So it sort of records it. So it cannot record every time. It will record only on critical times. You have to define it. When should it capture? When should it report? Whether it's material, immaterial, etc. Next is an integrated test facility. What this does is, it introduces a dummy record in the master. This is an examination question. Which of the following methods introduces a dummy or a fictitious record as part of the audit tool? It's ITF. Now, what this dummy record will say is, if somebody is using that, you sort of analyze, why is somebody using it? Maybe it's an error or to do a fraud. You sort of evaluate it. But the very important question is, how do I remove that, or how do I sort of fix this? Correct? So generally what happens is, it is programmed in such a way it can get auto reversed, or the effect of that is totally ignored. Correct? So you have to be a little careful. The third is called as a SCARF, System Control Audit Review File. SCARF, what happens? It is an embedded audit module. Okay, to some extent, you can say Tally has this feature. It has an audit module. I mean, it's not a scarf module, it just has an audit module which can help you. Scarf works in a little different. Now what happens, as and when there are errors, it will immediately go and record in some place. Even if you are rectifying that error also, it will go and record. So it will say, hey, this error happened, this will be rectified. So it will keep a track of it. Correct? So it will check independently the quality of the system processing. Any variances are there, it can identify that. They can ask an examination. Which of these audit tool techniques helps you to identify system exception and system variation? Scarf. Okay, that is something you have to remember. Then is a continuous improvement simulation. It's the next version of Scarf. So what this does is, this embeds an audit module within the database. I repeat, within the database. So that gives you an added layer of additional advantage. Okay, then is your audit hooks. These are just something which will flag suspicious transaction. Say for example, when you're passing an entry in Tally, you are passing negative cash. It just says negative cash. You can ignore that. But the real question is what you want to do with that. Correct? So do you want the notification to be as it is, deleted, etc. So this is one slide which gives you when to use which tool. One simple snapshot, very important from examination. Expect one examination question just based on this. Whenever you want an audit trail, best method is snapshot. Audit hook, complexity is the least, easiest to implement, but not much. Which is very, very high, Scarf. Correct? Regular processing. Continuous intermittent simulation, medium. ITF is complexity is high because it is, you have to reverse everything. Okay. They can also ask you an examination question. Which of these uses test data? It is INTF. Right. So this could be a very, very handy, good place where you can expect examination questions. Okay. So that's, I think, about this particular chapter. I'm not sure if we have anything more. I think that's about this particular chapter. So if there's any questions, I will take it. Otherwise,